So for this last example, this is very similar to one that we did in section 3.3, where it said there was vertical stretches and horizontal stretches. Find the new equation. But this one has a whole bunch of transformations. So it makes it a little bit more complicated because there might be stretches and compressions and translations happening. So how do we deal with that? Well, we start the same way that we started last time. We're going to look at what happens horizontally as we go from A to B. So on our original function, from A to B, what happens? We'd have to go down 16. So A to B is negative 16. Oh, I did vertically. Sorry, guys. A to B, horizontally. You're starting at 0 and you're going over to 2. Does it make more sense that you went right 2? And if you look at what's happening on the blue graph, from A prime to B prime, can you see that that's also goes to the right 2 units? So what has happened? What would you have to do to your x values to do that? Well, nothing. Or you would have to multiply them by 1, which means there won't be any horizontal stretches or compressions. But when we look at the vertical, again, from A to B, going from A to B vertically, you're going to have to go down 16. So we write that as negative 16. And A prime to B prime, now we're only going down 8. So how would I do that change? I would have to multiply my y values by 1/2. Now, in 3.3, this is all we had to do, and then we were done the question. What we're going to do in this one, and maybe it would be nice when we have multiple transformations and graphs, we can maybe put some steps off to the side. First, what we did was we found all the stretches and compressions. I guess if these are steps, we should do that in present tense. Find all stretches and compressions. That'll be step 1. Step 2, we are going to apply these stretches and compressions to our original points. What that means is we're going to take our original point A and our original point B, and we're going to multiply x by 1, so that's going to do nothing, but we're also going to multiply our y values by 1/2. And we're going to label those new points. So if I multiplied this point A, which is 0, 8, if I multiply by my x values by 1 and my y values by 1/2, can you see that you would get the point 0, 4? And same thing if I took my point B, which is at 2, -8, and I multiplied my x values by 1 and my y values by 1/2, I'm going to get 2, -4. Label those points. So apply the stretches, compressions to our original point, and label these points. step 3, we're going to find the translations from these new points. So we've labeled those new points after those stretches and compressions. Because if we think going from left to right, we always did stretches and compressions first and then translations next. So if we wanted to find one graph to the other, we would have to do the same thing. We figure out our stretches and compressions first and then find out how could I move 0, 4 to that point. I would have to go 2 to the left and 4 down. Does that make sense? Does that work for this point too? If I go 2 to the left and 4 down, does it match up? 2 to the left, 4 down? Yes, it matches up. So for step 3, after we figured out our horizontal and vertical stretches, labeled those new points, we can now find out what the translations are. And the translations are 2 to the left and 4 down. We have found all of our things. We can now write an equation for our blue graph in terms of the function f. And our blue graph is g of x, so I can write g of x equals, there is a vertical stretch, 1/2, f. There is no horizontal stretch or compression because we multiply by 1. But then we need to show 2 to the left, x plus 2, and 4 down, minus 4 at the end. So in the last 10 minutes, even if you haven't got all of your other questions done yet, try number 9, because these are the hardest questions so far, that we have everything combined using that graph. So that's why we wrote out these steps. We always find stretches, compressions first, then our translations. We have to apply those and put a new point, and then figure out what the translations would be.